Hi guys, we are looking at our homework for Chapter 19, Government Borrowing and National Savings. So let's just get right into this. Question number 1. In a country, private savings equals 600, and let's just say this is in billions, so it makes more sense. So 600 billion, the government budget surplus equals 200 billion, and the trade surplus equals 100 billion. What is the level of private investment in this economy? So we want to use the national savings and investment identity equation to solve this, which is right here, right here, okay? And we just simply plug in the numbers, and it's important to understand that the left side of the equation is the supply of capital or money, and the right side is the demand. So since we have a surplus here, in other words, the budget surplus of 200 is the difference between the tax revenue that the government takes in and the money that the government spends. This G is government spending, and the question is telling us that this is a positive 200, which means that the tax revenue is 200 billion more than a government spending. So this is on the supply then. So this is money being supplied, and the demand is the money for investment and the money for exporting. So and that's going to be a positive 100 because we have a trade surplus that equals 100. So the difference between exports and imports is a positive 100 billion. Or in other words, we're exporting $1 billion more dollars worth of goods and services more than we are importing. Okay, now why is that on the demand? Well, remember that when we export goods, foreign countries have to demand money, have to buy dollars in order to buy our goods. So this is why when net exports are a positive, they're on the demand side, or they're always on the demand side. Net exports are always going to be over here, I believe. Let me make sure. Yeah. Always going to be over here on the demand side. So you just simply do the math, and you find that in this case, private investment equals 700 billion. Now, in the next question, we're turning our $200 billion government budget surplus into a $50 billion deficit. So in order to find the answer here, and we're still wanting to know the amount of private investment, we need to rearrange our equation and put this deficit right here now goes on the demand side, because now we're demanding because we're actually spending more than the tax revenue. So in this case, we change T minus G to G minus T and put it over on the right side of the equation, or the side of demand, because now a government spending is a 50 billion greater than our tax revenue that the government is taking in. And we simply do our math again, plug in the numbers, and come up with a lower number for private investment, and that is due to the crowding out that happens when we have a budget deficit. Okay, so that's question number 2. Now for number 3, we're looking at a graph where we have interest rates on the vertical axis and quantity of loanable funds on the horizontal axis. And we're going to look at the different scenarios and explain whether demand or supply shifts, and which direction will they shift, and what will that do to the price or the interest rates of loanable money. So let's look at the first one here. So we have a budget, we have an increase in our budget surplus. So when that happens, we're going to have a shift in the supply. So when we have more money, and let's just jump over here, our supply curve is going to shift to the right, okay, like that. And when that happens, if you just think about that, if I put price line in here, right, and then when we shift from here to here, it's very obvious that that's going to lower our interest rates, okay? So that's one thing. Let's jump back over here. Now, crowding out here is not a problem because by reducing interest rates, this will encourage firms to borrow and to invest in physical capital or expansion or just different projects. Okay, so scenario number 2, the budget deficit increases and contractionary monetary policy is implemented. So what's going to happen there is we're going to once again we're going to get a rightward shift in our supply. A deficit. Sorry, I'm backwards. We're going to get a budget deficit is going to shift the demand for capital to the right. Okay, so because we're going to need money to make up for this deficit. So let's jump back over to. So if we start off where we were up here, and our budget deficit goes up, that's going to shift the demand to the right, like this, which is going to make which is going to cause an increase in our interest rates. Okay, now, what a contractionary monetary policy will do is shift the supply, because we're lowering the money supply. We're taking money out of the economy, so that's going to shift our supply curve to the left and lead to even higher interest rates. So both of these events here, the budget deficit getting higher and contractionary monetary policy, both of those are going to cause our interest rates to go higher, and so we're going to have a crowding out, and we're going to be discouraging firms from wanting to borrow money or demand a financial capital. Okay, because if we can see that if we shift the demand to the right and supply to the left, it's just going to drive interest rates even higher. Okay, so that's what's going to happen there. Okay, now what happens if we have an increase in our budget deficit and expansionary monetary policy is used? Well, once again, the increase in the budget deficit is going to shift, is going to mean more demand for loanable funds. So that's going to shift the demand curve to the right. But the expansionary monetary policy is going to shift the supply also to the right. So it's going to counter the effects of the higher budget deficit. So what's going to actually happen depends on the strength of each one. So we're not really sure. So if we go back and look at our graph right here, and we start off, let's just start back, let's just go to in equilibrium, right? And if this is where our, let's just put it like right here, if this is where we start, and a budget deficit goes up, which causes demand to shift here, and then we use expansionary monetary policy, which causes the supply to shift right, we could actually end up with the same interest rate if they shift just like I have right here. However, if we start, if we start here, right, and we have a large, and a budget deficit is if that increase is really, really large, and the demand goes way out here, and we only shift, and we only have a moderate, and the expansionary policy only has a moderate effect on supply, it might only shift a little. So we're still going to end up with a higher interest rate. And also, what could also happen is that we could have, just a moderate increase in the budget deficit, which would mean that demand shifts a little, but we have a very, very robust, a very, very robust expansionary monetary policy, which would shift this really far to the right, and we would end up with a lower interest. So it just depends on, how much each one of these two actions, how powerful that they are, or how effective that they are, and it's really hard to tell. Okay, so that takes care of that one. So I'm going to stop there and stop the video, and when I come back, I'm going to help you guys a little bit. I'm going to help you more out with some of the ones down below that require some math. But I think the ones before that you should be able to do on your own from the book. So stay tuned, and we're going to look at questions. Let's see. We're going to look at the questions 11 and 12. Okay?